Good morning. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Clemson. We are located on the historical lands of the Eastern Cherokee in southern Iroquois. My name is Carl Dieter, and I am your worship associate this morning. Whoever you are, wherever you are on your life journey, you are welcome here. Whomever you love, wherever you were born, whatever language you speak, you are welcome here. Whatever your skin color, whatever your class, background, whatever your range of abilities, you are welcome here. We welcome you and are so glad that you chose our fellowship as your place of worship this morning. Whatever your thoughts, whatever your desires, whatever your politics, whatever your theology. We come together for worship in order to slow down and listen for the callings of our hearts, our spirits. We come together for worship so that we can be reminded of our highest aspirations and continue to transform ourselves into our best selves. If you're joining us for the first time this morning, welcome. After the service, we gather for coffee and social connection in the social room. Please join us then. If you're interested in getting our weekly newsletter so you can get connected to our community, our weekly sharing of joys and concerns, and our collective efforts to support local social justice, please reach out to the office by email or on our website. I want to extend a special welcome to our visitors. If you would like, I invite you to stand as you're willing and able and to introduce yourselves. Do we have any visitors?
Yes, I am. My name is Ching-Fu Chen. My son was Wei, been telling me about this group for so long, and so I decided to come here, make my visit. So I think this is, from what I heard, it's a wonderful group. So I was trained as a scientist, genetic scientist, and now I have an early retirement, stay at home, and also work from home part-time. But so I'm looking at my joy and concern. So my joy is actually, maybe it's too high, but it's searching for enlightenment, peace of mind, and so that, I don't know, I think that's a worthy goal to pursue, spiritual growth, and I think that in line with this group and this fellowship goal. So that's why I decided to come, and I heard so much good thing about this group, so I wish everyone well. Thank you.
Do we have any other visitors?
Yeah, I guess I qualify. I've been in here a couple times before, but probably not in 10 years. I'm a Quaker, and there's no Quaker community locally, so I'm going to try things here.
What's your name, sir?
Leo Cougar, but I go by Lee.
Hi, welcome.
Welcome. Any other visitors?
The Quakers used to meet in our founder's house.
I was in that
Good,
group.
good, good. I just want to let you know.
And I want to extend a special welcome to those who are viewing our services online this morning. A few announcements. We are going to have a lot of fun this morning because we're going to have a fire drill. So exit through the door that's nearest to you, and keep in mind that the door near the piano has steps on it, and then make way for those who have walkers or canes or need assistance in other ways.
Where do we meet up?
We meet up out near the shed, which is about in the middle of the parking lot.
Carl, Do we come back in later?
I'm getting to that. So after the fire drill is over, we will return, or you're encouraged to return to the social room for hospitality. And you are going to be under observation because I understand the fire marshal is going to be here to view how we perform. So no pressure. You're also invited to the safety team meeting, which is on Wednesday, September 27th at 3 p.m. in the social room. And the Zoom for that meeting, the link will be in the weekly connection. So the stewardship campaign will kick off their 2024 campaign with an open mic night gala on Saturday, October 14th from 6 to 8 p.m. And again, for more information, check the weekly connection. The Planned Giving Committee is sponsoring a Giving with Intention luncheon and learn seminar next Sunday, starting at noon in the social room after the hospitality time. A light lunch will be served, followed by the presentation. Please register so they know how much food to prepare. And you can do that by emailing the fellowship office, or you can let Michael Elder know. And Michael, where are you? Michael is going to take names today if you would like to inform him that you will be attending the event. I'd also like to announce that the board meeting today will not be in the library, will be over in Founder's House. And then for more announcements, check at the back of the weekly bulletin, or the Sunday bulletin, and there's a whole list of announcements there. So let us rise in mind and body or spirit and sing together hymn number 361, Enter, Rejoice, and Come In. The opening words this morning are, "Welcome all," by Reverend Dr. David Breeden. Welcome all to this place of love and justice, this place where we attempt to live up to humanity's highest ideals, highest hopes. Do we fail? Yes, we do, often. Do we try again? Yes, we do, always. Welcome all to this place of love and justice, to this gathering where the sacred and the holy are our being together.
I'd like to invite Cody to come forward and light our chalice and invite all of you to join with me in reading our words of affirmation, which are found in your order of service. We gather together in spirit of love, with justice as our guide. This is our chosen covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth with freedom, and to care for one another.
Just a quick word about the fire drill for our families. Children who will be in their classes or in the nursery will be escorted out with their teachers and our child care workers. And you can meet up with them at the garden shed in the parking lot, and you can sign them out from their class from there. Our tale this morning is from the folklore of the Muslim world. These stories range from, you can find them from the Balkans to China, Turkey, Syria. And the hero of the story is variously known as Mullah Nasruddin or Nasreddin. This is a character who's at the center of a lot of humorous short stories and satirical anecdotes. And like many wise characters in the folklore of the world, he's famous for being a little bit odd. He's deeply involved in spiritual pursuits, and material comforts occupy a secondary place in his life. And no one ever really seems to know whether he's crazy or a sage because of his strange activities. So our story this morning is an adaptation that comes from one of our UUA curriculum. It's called Mullah Nasruddin Feeds His Coat. Mullah Nasruddin had been working in the fields all day long. He was tired and sweaty, and his clothes and shoes were covered with mud and stains. Because he had been fasting all day long for Ramadan, he was also quite hungry. But finally, it was almost sundown, and Nasruddin knew that he would soon be able to eat. The wealthiest man in town had invited everyone to come break their fasts in his home that evening with a huge feast. Nasruddin knew that he would be late if he went home to change his clothes before heading into town. He decided it was better to arrive in dirty clothes than to be late. Oh, what a party it would be! What a feast! As he walked to the wealthy man's home, Nasruddin imagined the delicious foods that he would soon be eating: dates, lentils and chickpeas, olives and bread, hummus, falafel, chicken and beef, and best of all, the desserts: halva, date rolls, figs, and baklava. When Nasruddin arrived, the wealthy man opened the door and looked Nasruddin up and down scornfully, from his worn, ragged clothes down to his muddy shoes. Without a word of welcome, he gestured for Nasruddin to come in and walked abruptly away. Now, I wonder what that wealthy man was thinking or feeling when he did that. Nasruddin joined the throngs of people who were all dressed in their finest clothing. The tables were laden with all sorts of delicious foods: dates and lentils and chickpeas, olives and bread, hummus, falafel, chicken and beef, and, best of all, the desserts: halva, date rolls, figs, and baklava. Despite his efforts to hurry, the seats were all taken, and nobody tried to move over or make a space for Nasruddin. In fact, nobody offered him food. He had to reach over and around people to get any food for his plate. Nobody spoke to him. It was as if he wasn't even there. I wonder how that made Nasruddin feel. The other guests ignored him so completely that Nasruddin could not enjoy the food on his plate, no matter how finely prepared and how tasty it was. In fact, after only a few bites, Nasruddin was so uncomfortable that he decided to leave. He hurried home and changed into his finest clothing, including a beautiful coat. Then he returned to the feast, and this time the host welcomed him with a huge smile. Come in, greeted the host. As Nasruddin entered, people waved and called to him from all corners of the room as they invited him to sit near them and offered him food. I wonder what those other guests were thinking now. I wonder how that made Nasruddin feel. Nasruddin sat down quietly. Picking up a plump fig, he carefully placed it into a coat pocket, saying, "Eat, coat, eat." Next, he took a handful of nuts and put them into his pocket, saying, "Eat, coat, eat." Now he began to feed his coat in earnest, grabbing all sorts of food. He fed the coat lentils and chickpeas, olives and bread, hummus, falafel, chicken and beef, and best of all, the desserts: halva, date rolls, figs, and baklava. The other guests became silent as they watched this strange behavior. Soon, everyone in the room was staring at Nasruddin, wondering what he was doing. The host hurried over, Nasrudin, what are you doing? Why are you feeding your coat in this manner? Well, Nasrudin replied, when I first came to this feast in my old farming clothes, I was not welcome. No one would speak with me. But when I changed into this coat, suddenly I was greeted warmly. So I realized it was not me that was welcome at this party, but my clothing. And so I am feeding my coat.
This is the time we set aside for the offering in order to give toward the financial vitality of this community. Also, 25% of the weekly collection each week goes to an organization in the local community that we partner with. For the month of September, we are partnering with the Clemson Child Development Center. For those of you at home, you can go to the UUFC website and use the donate button. There you will see options for paying your pledge and donating toward the organizations we partner with. Thank you for your generosity.
Thank you for these gifts that make our ministry possible. Now we enter into a time of sharing our joys and concerns. It is a sacred sharing of ourselves with one another, whether they are read aloud or remain quiet and tender upon our heart. It's a time that allows us to hold one another in love and care. And we have several joys and concerns today to share. And I invite you to hear these and hold them in your heart. We have one from Meg Williamson that on September 5th, she lost a sister. She was disabled in the nursing home and in poor mental health. Amanda shares that she works with the homeless. We lost someone we served this week. He was 17 and died of an overdose. Have a joy from Talia that it is my daddy's birthday. Happy birthday. Happy birthday. Have a joy from Elizabeth Branstad. My daughter, Christina, is marrying a wonderful man next Saturday. Congratulations. Have a note from Chen Fu Chen, reading, thinking, gardening, hiking, peace of mind, and well-being as joys. Have a joy from Kathy Crane, that UUFC's social action was strong last week. Our volunteers were involved with the monthly meal for our daily rest, and a good team worked with our monthly Habitat for Humanity gig. Thank you to Janie Shipley and Gordon Crane for arranging these for us. We have a joy from Jackie. I've just returned from a 3-week trip to I can't make out the word.
Eastern Capitals.
Eastern Capitals, okay. Sorry about that, yeah, in Eastern Europe. And have a concern for the many thousands of migrants gathered at our southern border hoping to cross over for a better life. We also have a concern to share this morning of holding both Dave and Karen Sanders in our hearts as Karen's sister passed just a few days ago, and they're traveling to be with family. And we add one final stone to the vessel this morning, representing all of those joys and concerns that are unspoken, but yet remain quiet and tender upon our hearts. And now we will transition to our RE classes for the children among us with singing "Go Now in Peace" as they go along their way. I have a reading this morning that I would like to share for you from the Reverend Kristen Harper. It's in a book called Voices from the Margins, and she writes about who is welcome. It says, everybody wants to sit a seat at the table. Blacks, Latinos, Asians, the poor, the disabled, gays, and lesbians. Where are all the straight, white, moderate men supposed to sit? I'm not prejudiced, I'm just asking. And what table are they talking about? The table I have only seats 8 comfortably, and I only have service for 10. That's it. You'll just have to wait your turn. Can you imagine if we just let anyone sit at our table? Why we might have people who can't tell their salad fork from their dinner fork. Or people who eat with their hands. I shudder to think. Anyone is welcome at my table in my home as long as you don't have grease stains on your clothes and have washed your hands before you touch my silverware. Everyone is welcome at my table as long as you don't try to proselytize to me of your religion or your politics. And don't get upset when I question yours. After all, it wasn't my faith that taught me to eat Jesus and drink his blood. Come on in, I say, but don't make fun of my Pan-African sculpture and paintings mixed with the chintzy curio precious moments figurines. And if you don't dress up and don't have every hair in place and you don't smell too fresh, you're welcome. But don't sit on the good leather or on the new futon cover. Here, let me get you a towel. I'm told that the outside shower works very well. Everyone is welcome at my table as long as you sit still and don't wiggle or interrupt the grown-up conversation. Children should be seen and not heard, but they should be dressed up in bows and satins so they can entertain us. Don't worry, if they're not talented, it only reflects on your upbringing, not mine. Truth is, I don't really have room at the table for you. Maybe next time. And you'll see in your order of service that we had the choir noted as performing today, but they're going to perform another week when we have more of the choir members present. And I've asked Corey to play just a brief interlude. Thank you. So we all know that that reading, hopefully, that I shared moments ago is a bit tongue-in-cheek, pointing out some of the challenges that can come up with being welcoming. Because it can be challenging to be radically welcoming, and we have to sometimes move outside of our comfort zone, move beyond our own assumptions and biases, our understanding of the status quo. And sometimes our actions can speak louder than our actual words. In the story that you heard for the Time for All Ages, the host didn't welcome in the farmer when he was dressed in his muddy clothes, just opened the door, made a sound, and looked him up and down. But how loud were those things, even unspoken, versus the welcome he had in his beautiful jacket when he returned. And our verbal cues or nonverbal cues are not always as obvious as they were in the Time for All Ages or the reading that I just shared. But they do exist sometimes. I had a friend for a number of years in high school that worked as an auto mechanic. And you would look at his fingers and think that he hasn't washed his hands, but I've watched him scrub his hands, and that little bit of oil or grease that was stuck in around the fingernails might make them seem dirty, but I knew they were not. When we make assumptions about somebody's appearance, we can be less welcoming than we would like. Maybe it's not as obvious as saying, don't sit on the leather furniture, but instead go, hey, let me get you a towel. And sometimes that makes sense. Sometimes somebody asks for it. But I want to say that, they might not always be so overt, But there are small things that can make big impacts that we're not always aware of. And I want to lift up just briefly the piece that the choir planned on performing and will perform sometime in the near future for the delight of all of us, speaks about the crowded table, a space where there is for everyone to gather around, a place by the hearth for the fire, for everyone to feel as though they belong. What would we need to do to accomplish this? How might we make space for everyone? How might we work together to build beloved community? Well, to answer that, I think we need to consider what beloved community means, because we might have different definitions for that term. So I'm going to base ours off of the 8th principle, because this congregation earlier this summer adopted the 8th principle, which it states, "We, the member congregations of the Unitarian Universalist Association, covenant to affirm and promote journeying towards spiritual wholeness by working to build a diverse, multicultural, beloved community by our actions that accountably dismantle racism and other oppressions in ourselves and in our institutions." So, in this context, in the 8th principle that you all have adopted, what does beloved community mean? The 8th principle website answers that by saying, when they say beloved community, it happens when people of diverse racial, ethnic, educational, class, gender, abilities, sexual orientation, their backgrounds and identities come together in an interdependent relationship of love, mutual respect, and care that seek to realize justice within the community and in the broader world. I believe that as you use, we are both part of a beloved community here, and that we are also desperately trying to create a beloved community in the wider world around us. My hope is that we improve and do a better and better job of expanding that beyond our walls. Often there is a sense of having to give something up for us to create a more just and equitable society. But life is not like a pie with only so many pieces that can be cut from it. Life is more complex than that. Someone else having access to healthy, affordable food does not mean that you will go hungry. What you eat should not be dependent on where you live or how you dress, whether your clothes are muddy or your fingernails are dirty. There are far too many food deserts in our country that limit access to healthy food options. There are ways that these things can be addressed by advocating for community gardens or grocery stores, access to food programs. And while I could probably do a whole other sermon on that, I'm going to get back to beloved community for today. Because creating beloved community means breaking down the barriers that prevent justice from existing. Those barriers that are not always visible and that we may not be able to disrupt if we don't see them. One of my professors in seminary was fond of saying, and maybe you've heard this from other sources, once you see it, you can't unsee it. Whatever that it is, whatever justice issue that it is, once we're aware of it, it's hard to ignore it, or at least I hope that it's hard for us to ignore it. We are part of a culture, a society that perpetuates systems that are beyond our control and that are as much a part of our life, more so than we may even realize. The status quo actively maintains itself through messages that we receive from the media, our education systems, our families, and our larger communities. We have seen how education systems have been actively working to maintain a status quo, a narrative that is the approved narrative, by banning books, banning coursework. Coming from Florida, I got to witness them banning African American studies for AP courses and banning psychology AP courses because they talked about gender and sexuality and history that Florida doesn't want people to talk about. And while South Carolina might not be as bad as Florida yet, I've been told recently that it's like South Carolina is looking at Florida and Texas as playbooks and taking notes to figure out what to do. It's a pretty scary time. Banning books and courses and rights to make decisions about one's own body, whether it is someone that is a woman and reproductive health or a trans person making medical decisions about their own bodies. I'm part of a group called TRUST, which stands for Trans Religious Professional UUs Together. And each year they have an annual retreat or gathering. At times in the past, that's been held in Florida. But for out trans queer people, going to Florida seems pretty unsafe right now, so they decided to move to somewhere else that wasn't outwardly, obviously attacking trans people.
Where?
Well, they picked Southern California and San Diego. And, you know, there are over 200 bills in states across the country that are working to have anti-trans, anti-LGBTQIA legislation. And so, yes, finding a place that is not as bad as Florida, you know, is a tall order. But there are ways that we can support various different justice issues that are happening around us. Is anyone here familiar with the Side with Love campaign? All right. They have some really great resources, trainings, helping people in various different states organize around issues. And then here in South Carolina, we have a group that's sometimes called SCUJA, or South Carolina UU Justice Alliance. And if you haven't heard of it and haven't registered to go, there's a gathering on October 7th in Columbia that several folks from the congregation are going. And it is a gathering of all 10 South Carolina UU congregations. And they are going to be discussing justice issues that are specific to this state. And that allows us to engage with those as a collective body of UUs. And so I want to return to this idea of the status quo briefly. The status quo allows us to stay in our comfort zone in ways that impact our services and our worship as well. We may not realize that some of the things that we do are not always the most welcoming. Despite our best efforts or thoughts, we are sometimes still very white Protestant model of church and our order of service and the way we engage. And while I don't think we need to change all of that overnight or change it entirely, maybe we could move out of our comfort zone from time to time. couple of years ago, there was an article written by Reverends Erica Hewitt and Julica Harmon de la Fuente, and it was titled Dismantling White Supremacy Culture in Worship. And they say the status quo is not radically inclusive. The status quo is not beloved community. The status quo is never going to get us free. Decentering the status quo is important, both as a goal and as a process. If we're unable to change our liturgy, our expectations of worship, and how the container of worship is structured, how can we build our tolerance for decentering the status quo outside of worship? End quote. And this was really helpful for me, especially as we were talking about adopting the eighth principle at that time, and now living into the eighth principle. What are the ways that we can shift our own thinking within our own context? And I've heard this several times, both in UU circles and in other contexts with ministers, is one of the goals of ministry is to comfort the afflicted and to afflict the comfortable. For me, this means bringing up topics that aren't always comfortable to talk about, talking about change. And it doesn't mean that we throw everything out or make big sweeping changes. I'm new here. I'm not going to make any huge sweeping changes right now. I have to get to know all of you and to understand the culture of this congregation better. But my role as the minister is to get us thinking, to think about things differently, to think about how we engage in the community, how we engage with one another. And while change is at times uncomfortable, it is a constant. You know, you've heard the saying, the only constants in life are death and taxes, and that's inaccurate because not everybody pays taxes, right? But change and death are the two constants in life.
Reverend
And
Molly, we need to evacuate, please. Fire drill. There is a fire drill, and you would please head to the door closest to you, either by the piano
or by the foyer door.